right. I guess we'll get started here. Thank you guys all for being here. I know it's late on a Thursday towards the end of Startup Week, so it means a lot that you guys are here to attend. On a personal note, so I'm Craig. I'm the co-chair for the growth track for Denver Startup Week, and I've really been looking forward to this discussion. I know all these panelists and think the world of them. And on a personal note, when I started my career in marketing and could sort of peel back kind of the channel split for companies that were doing hundreds of millions of dollars, I was sort of blown away by the amount of revenue that was coming from email and SMS specifically, but really email, right? It's this sort of amazing thing where you just kind of set something up once, particularly on the automated side, and even as you don't look at it, it's driving tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. So it's incredibly important. I'm excited to dive deeper on it with this group. And without further ado, I'll let everybody introduce themselves.
All right, my name is Kristen Shearer. I drive the CRM team for North America at Crocs. So at Crocs, that consists of email, SMS, and we recently launched an app, so push notifications as well. I've been in the CRM space in e-commerce for the past 10 years, everything from setting up email programs from the ground up to managing programs of 17 million subscribers. So really run the full gamut.
Hi there, Walter Long, Director of Business Development Enterprise with Wunderkind. If you're not familiar with Wunderkind, we help brands increase digital revenue. That's a good thing, anywhere between about 7 to 20%. And we help those brands identify their website visitors so they could be marketed to using highly targeted, high converting email and SMS messages.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Brian Ritchie, so I run an email marketing and SMS agency here in Denver, specifically working with startups and small businesses. So excited you guys are all here. Been in the email space for about 10 years. I've worked for a number of email marketing agencies, ESPs, they're email service providers, do a lot of work on the strategy, automation, analytics, and optimization and testing. So excited for the conversation.
Cool. So we've got a lot to cover across email and SMS. We're going to go through how to collect information on site, campaign sends, triggered sends, maintaining list integrity and health, omni-channel strategy, how email and SMS kind of work in concert, tools and resources. So there's a lot to cover late in the day. Having said that, I kind of want to get a feel for the audience in two different ways. So by show of hands, how many of you here are starting businesses and are just looking to learn, your small businesses looking to learn more about email from the ground up? Okay, great. How many of you work at agencies or other things and are looking to understand email marketing for your clients? Okay, great. And if there's some brave people in the audience, what are you looking to take away from this? You can just kind of popcorn. What are certain things that you want to be sure that we cover or that you want to leave knowing? Awesome. So SMS, existing versus new customers and engagement. Okay. Cool. Cool. So, be sure to cover all this in your responses. I will say we kind of break it out section by section, and so encourage you guys to ask questions throughout to keep us on that we're kind of covering all these points. So I guess to kick it off, Kristen, I'll start with you. Obviously, there have been, whether it's privacy or other just kind of broader changes, Apple security changes, Facebook, iOS changes, why walk us through sort of the evolution and the importance of email and SMS. Why today is it still relevant and still more important than really ever? What's going on in the space?
Yeah, I feel like ever since I started working in email marketing, people have been talking about the death of email marketing, and it just hasn't come. As a matter of fact, the opposite. All of the previous e-commerce companies I've worked for, email has been responsible for anywhere from 10 to 40% of the company's revenue. So it's a hugely important channel. And as I'm sure most of you are aware, third-party data not looking so good for the future. Cookies are going to be dead over the next couple years. So as much as you can collect first-party data, the better. Now is really the time to lay that groundwork and to start to collect email addresses, collect phone numbers, so that you really can have a channel that you can track, you can test, and you can really get insights as to how your customers are feeling. I will say email can kind of tend to be the victim of its own success, and that's something to watch out for over the next couple of years. Already, like prior to the death of cookies, email is the channel that's like, we need to make a couple extra $100, send an email. We need to push this product, send an email. So you really have to be protective of your list and how you segment so that you're not just pummeling your customers with the success of email.
Anything to add, Brian or Walter?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that, a lot of it really depends on, and, like Kristen mentioned, it's all about kind of getting that, either first party or zero party data. So when you do get a visitor, you probably have a lot of, on-site capture experiences. Maybe you're offered a particular discount in exchange for your email address. You're then signed up for a list and you get a coupon code. That is a great and very effective way to engage with new visitors to your website. Essentially, it's like going to someone's house for the first time. You want to greet someone in, you offer them a drink, you offer them a snack. It's kind of that thing. One of the other things that we're going to be talking about here, I think quite a bit, is kind of like cookies, right? I think where the on-site capture experience kind of gets negated a little bit or gets a little bit cloudy is where the on-site capture experience pops up for repeat customers, where there's a discount that's offered, but you know what? A lot of brands kind of reserve that particular discount for repeat purchasers. Not repeat purchasers, initial purchasers and not repeat purchasers. So you get this very loyal customer that's coming back looking to make an additional purchase. They see 20% off, they enter their information only to realize at checkout that 20% off is not valid for them. That's a big bummer. So there are ways that we're going to be highlighting some solutions to be able to suppress on-site capture experiences for those individuals that are already on your list, and also market to them in the event that they don't convert within that particular session.
So let's start, and Brian, I'll go to you, but essentially, so we talk about first-party data, right? That's your customer's sort of name that they're giving to you, their name, email address, other information. Brian, walk us through, you obviously work with a host of startups. What are the best ways, sort of the pop-ups or whatever, to collect customer information to then communicate to, again?
Sure. Is this thing on? Okay. I think there's a ton of different ways to collect information depending on what your business is. Obviously, as Walter was talking about, like pop-ups on the homepage as new visitors are coming to your website, it's going to be a surefire way to collect an interested person. Nowadays, people are willing to give you their email relatively easily, especially for some sort of exchange of value. It doesn't have to be a coupon. It could be an ebook. It could be a free gift. There's a lot of different things that you can do to try to get that exchange of value for that email and SMS nowadays. I think the other component is, where else are people giving you their info? So if you're an e-commerce, the checkout, people are going to be offering their email at checkout even if they abandon. That's a great place also for SMS. But also think about, and in the US, you can kind of get away with this, but transactional messages. So if you are sending transactional messages for an order, you have their email, but do you have their SMS? That's a great time to kind of promote the idea of, hey, thanks for your recent purchase. If you'd like more product updates from us, here's a text number to join our SMS program. So, kind of think holistically across the beginning of the purchase cycle to when you've purchased to after, and think about all the different ways that you can collect email. And that's just on your site. I think there's 100 other ways, from Facebook lead ads and social media campaigns that you can also elicit getting people to sign up. Kristen or Walter, any thoughts?
Just one piece of advice. I feel like the biggest thing with email collection is don't make people think. Put the email sign up units where people expect to find them. We don't want to add any friction to that experience.
And how can you talk a little bit about custom audiences and lookalike audiences and the way to leverage the email addresses that you're collecting both for your own communications but also reaching new people? Can you define that a little bit?
Sure. So what Craig was talking about in the context of like lookalike audiences is the idea that you've built an email list of maybe 100 customers. You can then use those same email addresses with Facebook and say, Facebook, if you also see these email addresses in your user base, these are customers that we value. We want to find people that look like them. So Facebook has hundreds and hundreds of data points about people on their network. And based on having that email address, they can start to match people similarly to those data points that they have in addition to the email address. I was going to say this earlier, and one of the trends that we are seeing really recently is privacy, right? So nowadays with iOS controls 50% of all email opens, whether you use an email address or not. And so they're having this huge impact. And I think that being able to have your email address and being able to collect it and build your list over time is also important because Facebook's getting more expensive to capture those addresses. Paid advertising in general is more expensive. So the more that you can have a relationship with your email subscribers and kind of nurture and retain those, we'll talk about that later. I think it's going to be a really important facet for all of you guys.
Any questions from the group in terms of on-site experiences in collecting email addresses? Or when? Yeah.
Generally speaking, I think it depends on what you're going to do with it. If it's more for personalization as like, hi Craig, thanks for signing up. I often don't require a last name because more of like the first name is that more casual, personal, conversational tone, which I see work really well with email. I would be careful about how many fields you end up collecting and whether or not you're actually going to use it. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend last name, but it certainly depends on kind of how you're going to use it.
And depending on the particular offer, if there's a really big important point that you'd then use for segmentation, it could be an opportunity to replace last name with some other particular field and maybe limit it to one or two if really necessary. It could go a long way in terms of creating those segments and personalizing those messages, which, for the gentleman that mentioned that he doesn't really respond to emails all that much, if you got something maybe more personalized that spoke with you a little bit better, maybe that would have a better pull.
And just to define segmentation, essentially, Kristen, at Crocs, that would be you indicating somehow that you're interested in sandals, and so you're only going to get sandals content moving forward. That's right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few ways that you can gather that data. We have a preference center. I would recommend it where you can fill out that I'm interested in sandals. So your consumer can speak to you, but you can also see what they're clicking on, see what they're purchasing, and identify the interest that way. I don't deal with that. If somebody doesn't want to read my emails, I don't want them on my list. So, I mean, I think a lot of people subscribe for emails because they do want to receive product updates and discounts and consistent communications. And those are the people I'm crafting my messages for.
I would just say to that, that's a cue for what is the opt-in, right? If people are signing up quickly and then deleting just to get a quick coupon, it's probably an imbalance of what they see as the value with your company or your business. So that could also be an opportunity to start to test and say, okay, if this is turning out to be a lot of deletes or a lot of bounces or invalid addresses, something's not right. Let me start to tweak the offer, or let me start to tweak where this pop-up occurs, because I think that is also an opportunity to say, okay, maybe it's not necessarily the people we want, but there is some info that can guide you to improve those results over time. That is a loaded question. I think the value of an email is, in my mind, is very high. As a business metric, it's going to depend on your industry and what you're selling. But I think in the consideration of this conversation and kind of, what is the true value of an email, I think the way I look at it is it's a way to have a one-on-one relationship with somebody who might become a customer. And that person who might become a customer might become a loyal customer and an advocate for your brand. So the more that you can really tailor the messaging and be personalized and show value so that they purchase and purchase again, but also try to advocate for you and refer business to you, the better.
Oh, just real quick. I know that a lot of brands are using Google Analytics and UTM parameters to be able to track the particular campaigns that they're coming from. So I know that we're going to be touching on triggered email here as well. So measuring the performance related to triggered email and measuring the lifetime value of those customers and the ROAS that comes back on those particular things can help you dictate what type of offers or any kind of discounts that you could be offering to match up what you give away versus what you get back.
So one more question before jumping into triggers. Go for it.
Yeah, so I in my business model, I mostly email B2B businesses. So I have over thousands of emails. How do you personalize thousands of emails or individuals for them to actually look at your emails and open up and not see your box back?
You want to try?
I think in the B2B world, it's a little bit harder. Presumably, you've captured those businesses because they've had an interaction with you. That is better than, I'd say, purchasing a list, which, especially for B2B, can be really enticing, but it also leads to a lot of problems down the line. So, circling back to your question, it all comes down to the data. So if you only have email, I would start to test and kind of figure out, okay, what does this business do? Maybe why did they sign up, and put them into subsegments that way and start tailoring the message to that. And then you can also do things in the email to try to collect additional information about them. So as an example, you could put a small survey in the email. If you send it to a subsegment and you get 30% clicks button 1, 30% clicks button 2, you start to collect these additional data points that don't really mean much to those users, but you're starting to identify who they are, what they're interested in, and how you might be able to message to them better.
And within the email itself, Christian, I guess, what can be personalized, right? There's the subject line, there's the first name, like tactically within the body of the email, what's dynamic?
Yeah, subject line, any sort of copy, you can bring in content dynamically. There are some great products out there like movable ink that will allow you to change up your content depending on who's opening your email. So I recommend taking a look at some of those. Some ESPs have that built right in. Most do actually. But yeah, pretty much anything. If you want to change up dynamically depending on your subscriber, you can do it.
We talked about email collection, and now I want to move into automation in the sense of a welcome flow, right? So, within e-commerce, essentially, I don't know what the statistic is, but let's call it 97% of customers who visit your site don't necessarily buy on that first purchase. And so it's really important to collect their information and then nurture them long term. So can you speak to the importance of welcome series, best practices, number of emails, what you should be speaking to? Can you give us an overview on welcome series 101?
Sure, I'm happy to kick that off. And, yeah, you're right. If there's a brand that has a 3% conversion rate, 97% of those visitors are leaving. And because of cookies, even first-party cookies, what we know is that cookies get deleted. Cookies have an expiration date. Cookies are not tracked across devices, and everyone is getting a new iPhone every year. So it's it's increasingly difficult to be able to follow up with those individuals once they leave. So, for brands that are relying on an ESP or other cookie-reliant solution to follow up with those individuals, what we found is that out of the 97% that are hitting the site and not purchasing, those ESPs are only able to identify about 5% of those visitors, kind of enabling, the browse and cart abandoned emails, which is a dream come true. It's right person, right time, right product, and they're in the purchase behavior. So, the solution there is really to leverage a non-cookie reliant identity network that works in conjunction with your ESP. And as a result of that, what you're able to do is significantly scale things like browse and cart abandons to a magnitude of about 5 to 10x. So when we speak with brands, we typically find that about 1% of overall digital revenue comes from browse and cart abandons. Multiply that by 5 to 10x. Now you're looking at 5 to 10% of your overall digital revenue is now attributable to these browse and cart abandons because you're opening up the pool. You're not reliant on cookies, which even first-party cookies are limited. And going to your question, Craig, about a welcome series, I know that's where we wanted to go as well. When someone does sign up, I think it's very important to kind of set the expectation and kick off the relationship on the right foot. It is a great idea to kind of set the expectation around what the communication will look like, what the frequency of the communication will look like. You can have that user dictate how they would like to be communicated as well. Some people are very, very text friendly. My wife would rather receive a series of text messages. I don't want to receive text messages from advertisers. So providing your visitors the choice and how they would want to be communicated really goes a long way.
Kristen, tell us about, building on that, tell us about Crocs Welcome Series. So somebody comes to the site, they give you their email address. What do you send them?
So we offer a 15% off discount. I don't think you have to offer, I think Brian touched on it earlier, you don't have to offer a discount if it doesn't work for your business. You could offer early access to new products or something like that, but we offer 15%. Definitely, if you're gonna send a discount, send a resend of that discount before it expires. Before the iOS changes, which we actually didn't touch on, but basically it's really hard to gauge if subscribers are actually opening emails anymore because of some iOS changes. Open rates used to be about 25%. Now they read as closer to 50. So anywhere from 75% plus of your subscribers are not getting that first email with the discount. So always send a resend, long story short. But basically it's a good opportunity to warm the subscriber up to your brand, give them a little bit of insight as to the company's values, product line. And then you can build some pretty intricate journeys as to like, if you got their email address, if they entered the welcome series from a purchase, maybe you don't need to offer that discount and you can kind of branch your subscribers out to give a different experience based on the subscriber themselves. Maybe they clicked on a certain link in one email, you send them down a different path, so you can really start to give your subscribers a personalized experience straight from that very first series that they enter.
Brian, anything to add?
I was just going to add for like the startup crew, usually you're going to have one handful of products. So how do you write a long email series that's not going to be repetitive? And I think part of that is just thinking about it from the perspective of what information does your potential customer need to know to decide to purchase is kind of the answer. If it's a one product, you're a jean company, you have a unique style, maybe it's one, maybe it's two. If you are a tech company, you're releasing a new innovative piece of equipment, you're probably going to need a longer series to really educate your users why you're different and why they should buy from you. So I would think about that. The other consideration for a welcome series is don't try to get them to click to too many things at one time. Each email should really have one purpose, and that's to click to one place, generally speaking. So also think about that. Where do you want your visitors to go, and how is that going to help them decide to purchase with you?
And one more thing to build on that before we open it up for questions about welcome flows specifically. Talk to us about the best types of content. Is it video? Is it photo? Is it text? And how, to that question earlier, what should you be highlighting in a welcome series specifically?
I'll go first. the general rule of thumb that I've found is that somebody's going to give you 26 seconds to evaluate whether or not they're going to keep reading, click through, do anything with your brand once they receive their email. So, I always recommend keeping any sort of written content super short, 1 to 2 sentences. Always use bullets as much as you can because people are going to be scanning the content, and try to organize it into mini sections. So again, section headlines. It makes it very easy to scan. And then as much as possible, I like graphics, especially infographic type information where people want to slow down and kind of investigate, discover what that graphic is. I think those always help. Short animation, so animated GIFs, also very popular in terms of just capturing the eye, getting people to slow down, getting people to read.
Yeah, I think I'll just add test everything. The company I was working at prior to Crocs, we had this beautiful welcome email that was fully designed with GIFs and images, and it just looked gorgeous. We tested it against a plain text email, and unfortunately the plain text email won. It had one link in it. It was just like a few sentences, and that was the email that we saw the most revenue come in from, so that's what we had to go with.
Why
So
does that always happen?
I know.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, my hunch as to why the plain text email worked better in that case is because it felt like it was a personal email coming from somebody that worked at the company or coming from the CEO. So I think like having that as the very first touch point made the company feel smaller and made the consumer feel bigger. But I don't know. I just continue testing it in all different points of the customer life cycle, and you just never know where it'll perform.
It's a bit of a cheat code in some ways when to kind of use it. I don't know, pre-holiday, sort of early, it does work. People do click through on plain text. I've also seen a bunch of brands have kind of hacked together big sales days by mocking exchanges between employees. Like, hey, are you ready to launch that discount code, tomorrow, right? And you send it out that day. So people think through a plain text email that they're getting early access to something. A lot of brands have had success with that too. It's super bizarre. But anyways, you had a question.
Yeah, I would say less than 7 days is the sweet spot. When they subscribe to your email, that's when they're interested in purchasing. So the quicker you can get them to convert, the less likely you have to lose them.
Any other questions about welcome series?
The challenge with embedded video is not every ISP will render it. And so generally speaking, if you include an email where it looks like there's a video, maybe a thumbnail and a play button, great engagement point. People will click it for sure. But I would stray away from trying to actually embed the video because it won't work in every ISP. Real quick, actually, I wanted to address a welcome for SMS for the audience who was here for SMS. So, I think nowadays, when you're capturing email and SMS, from a timing perspective, I would send the SMS first. They're ready, they're engaged, they've given you that number. So especially if you're giving like a coupon, send it right away. And then I usually follow up with an email with the same code, just in case they didn't have a chance to look at the SMS or they needed to reference it later. It's always a good way to kind of balance the two mediums.
Structurally, should you be collecting SMS first? Should it be email first? And then if they give you their email, ask about SMS after? Like, how do you balance collecting the information?
Email first, SMS later. the value of an SMS to somebody is so much greater these days. People are a little bit more cautious to give an SMS number. So to the point of, 97% of people abandon your website, at least get the email first. They're going to be more willing to give it to you and then follow up with the SMS.
So this is about automation, and I do want to talk about triggered, sends, but on the campaign side, how does what you send someone via SMS differ from what you should be sending them through email?
For the most part, we mirror what we're doing in email and SMS. Sometimes we'll balance the day. Like if we're sending an email about something on Monday, we'll send an SMS about it on Tuesday. I think SMS has some unique advantages, though, that email doesn't necessarily have, which is that it's really quick. If you want to get a message out that you think of on Monday and you want to get it out by lunchtime, SMS is the perfect opportunity for that. I think to SMS, like Brian was saying, SMS subscriber, the value of a phone number is a little bit higher. So you can use these phone numbers to give your deepest discounts, your most exclusive early access. So we kind of view our SMS list as like the insiders.
SMS is text message.
Just one thing real quick on that. I think it's a great point that was brought up here. Communicate with people, email and SMS. Just make sure that those two are working in concert with one another. Because if you're a brand and you're working with two different vendors and they don't talk to one another, they're trying to fight for attribution for that customer. So what ends up happening in some cases is that there are more emails that go out than necessary. There's more text messages that go out than necessary, and then the individuals get over communicated with, and that creates a negative customer experience. So just make sure that there's some cohesiveness and a strategy between managing those two.
I think it depends, how many people, are you segmenting your SMS list? Is it kind of a general to your whole SMS list? I typically wouldn't do more than once a week. But again, I think it also depends on how big your list is and how you segment it.
I think the question of frequency is something that SMS, it's a little bit more sensitive, but email, it's an issue as well. And I think the best way to find your sweet spot is to keep an eye on your KPIs. If you notice you send 2 SMS one week and you notice your unsubscribe rate skyrockets to something you're uncomfortable with, that's kind of your indication that you should lower.
I would say no. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, email on the web went through the change of being mobile first and responsive. So when you're doing an email, always think mobile first, because I've seen anywhere between 60 and 70% of emails are opened on mobile. So keeping that in mind, I would say, for me, SMS versus email is time boundness. So I would send an SMS if it's a super urgent time thing. To the example earlier, hey, you've got 24 hours left in this sale. That would be an SMS because there's a time boundness to that versus an email where they may not see it till the next day.
Can everybody hear the questions, or should we repeat them? Okay, just repeat the questions when they're asked.
Sorry.
Cross sells and upsells.
Yeah, I think that you can really leverage both of those. One of the things that kind of came to mind that some brands are doing that not all brands are kind of aware of is, and I think this might be a peripheral kind of answer to your question, but maybe a tidbit that you can take some value from, is that after someone places an order, there are some brands that are incorporating a fulfillment delay. So before it gets actually sent to the fulfillment center for a delivery, you can utilize SMS and email on your order confirmation communication to say, hey, it's not too late to add this to your shipment. Cue that in. I've seen it be a very effective way to increase average order value, kind of get that in there and utilize that communication that a lot of people open and engage with.
All right, so really quick, we've got about 25 minutes left and a lot to cover. So I kind of want a show of hands. So there's 3 or 4 main topics. One is campaign sends, right? So that's just brand messaging on a weekly, basis. And then within triggered or automated sends, there are things like we mentioned welcome series. There's cart abandonment. So somebody added a product to cart and didn't check out. There's post purchase, which ties into upsells. Somebody made a purchase. What do you communicate with them? There's browse abandonment. So somebody looked at the site and didn't add to cart. So there's a lot that we could talk about. So by a show of hands, who wants to jump into campaign sends? Okay, who wants to jump into post purchase sends? And who wants to do cart abandonment? Oh, I would have won.
It's not the sexy thing, but there's a way to make it sexy.
So campaign sends. I guess, Brian, actually, I'll start with you. Obviously, you work with a ton of startups here locally. Walk us through some best practices around just, campaign and just kind of maintaining relationships with customers.
I think the number one advice I give startups is kind of stepping away from the campaign, but thinking about your list. It is an asset. It is going to be one of your most valuable things as a startup, but also think of it as a relationship. One of the biggest things that I see, especially with startups, is they're like, I'm going to do a blast. And I cringe and I cry in my sleep when I hear the word blast, because that just, to me, shows, you're not trying to be personalized. You're just trying to spray and pray, hoping that a handful of people will convert. And so it's always a matter of looking at who are you trying to send a message to? What is the message? Because if you just think sending one message to everybody is going to always work, it won't, and it'll actually burn out your list. So more for me on the campaign best practices side is start thinking about the segmentation and then how that segmentation will drive your content. Because you might have an email where the content or the sale is the same, but how you present it might be slightly different, and that really makes a big difference for people on your list.
You mentioned a term, list health, right? Like where I worked previously, we would only send emails to people who had opened something in the last 90 days. And when it was our big tentpole events, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, then we would open it up. Can you go deeper on list health and certain metrics that you look for or best practices around avoiding spam filters, making sure your content shows up? Can you talk about list health?
So unsubscribe rate is an obvious KPI to keep an eye on. I also like to take a look at the disaffection index, which is the number of unsubscribes divided by the number of clicks. And the reason I like to look at that one is because your overall unsubscribe rate is kind of an indication of the full picture. So it could include things like, are you emailing too many times? Whereas if you're looking at the unsubscribes out of the people that actually made it all the way to your site, that's an indication of, is your content resonating? So I think that's kind of a good thing to look at. But overall list health, you want look at industry standards for click-through rate, make sure you're in a comfortable spot, and then continue to test. I
would say list hygiene is also important. Without going down a rabbit hole, email, I'm hesitant to even discuss this, but email has kind of like a credit report in the industry. So if you have a low credit report in email, your emails won't be delivered. And that's 100% controlled by Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and it takes a lot of work to fix your credit report. So in the context of list hygiene, if you're constantly sending to people who never open your emails, that will affect your credit score in email. So looking at opens are a little bit harder to look at now, but clicks, unsubscribes, those are all even down funnel metrics like who's converting, who's visiting the page and active on the website. All of these are really good metrics to build your segments on to maintain a healthy list. The other thing I'll say, and I'll let the other two speak, is as a startup, I see a lot of businesses really concerned about, it took me a long time to build this list. this was expensive to build. I'm not gonna not send to these subscribers. And because of that credit score, it can hurt you, but the value of an email address goes well beyond being able to send them an email. So as we were talked about with lookalikes, as we talked about with Google Ads, you can do a lot of things with even unsubscribed email addresses, then send them an email. So just be mindful of that. Even if somebody does unsubscribe, you can still leverage that.
Yeah, I'll just want to add one thing. You triggered a thought related to the credit score. Since this is startup week, I imagine a lot of you guys are just getting email programs off the ground. Email, an ESP, is related to, or it connects directly to an IP, and you want to have a healthy IP rating in order to have healthy deliverability. So you want to warm up your IP. So from the get-go, you're only hitting your subscribers that are engaged, and that'll start to build your reputation so that you don't start off on the wrong foot and immediately get put into those spam filters. So if you are starting a program, just Google like best practices for warming up an IP. Can't stress that enough.
Repeat the question.
Okay, I think the question was, how do you, best enrich your data, and in terms of utilizing maybe third parties to enrich that data, how good is that? Well, maybe I'll let Kristen kind of speak to, or Brian kind of speak to some of the examples around that. A lot of the value that I've kind of seen like firsthand is leveraging what consumers actively kind of provide to you, of course, right? And eliminating any kind of cookie dependency will go a real long way. So if you're able to identify individuals and you work with a non-cookie reliant identification vendor in conjunction with your ESP, it'll go a long way in terms of being able to communicate with your highest targeted customers overall.
So the question was, are there any best practices for how you tag so you can build out new segments? In terms of your question, can you kind of expand upon what you're thinking about for tags? Like what are you looking for? So I would say in the context of an e-commerce website, if you're using something like Shopify or WooCommerce or those platforms, you can actually get that data from just on-site behavior or abandoned cart behavior, so that you can create those audience or even purchase behavior. So if somebody purchased one sustainable category, you can create a segment of people who also purchase that category versus having to tag them kind of preemptively.
Yeah, I'd say maybe consider a preference center as well, where people can self-select what categories they're interested in.
Any other questions on campaign send?
You mentioned a couple of times like moving away from cookies and non-cookie methods. Can you just give a little deeper example of like how some of those work, or who you see work, or just like what are the alternatives?
Yes, without sounding too salesy, because that's what my company does. I will say that as you're starting out, I think phase number one, the most important thing is to try and get as many customer records and as many email addresses that you can to kind of build your list. And then when you start to build your list up, it's very effective to know kind of behind the scenes who's already on your list without interrupting the purchase process. And behind the scenes, if you're able to know who is hitting your website, to be able to automatically trigger and expand the overall universe of individuals that you're able to market to. So two components. If someone's already on your list, you should have a mechanism in place that's non-cookie reliant that can identify that individual, that will initiate that triggered email. If someone is not on your list, at that point, some kind of site capture experience it could be an incentive, could not be an incentive. There's a variety of forms to do that. Is very effective to build your list and then get the opt-in so you're able to follow up with that individual. There are a number of sources available. That's what my company Wonderkin really focuses on. So it's all about device match, identity resolution, and going away from cookie reliancy and dependency.
Any other questions about Campaign Sends? Yeah. The question is around tools and resources for email and SMS.
I like Klaviyo for email. That's not what Crocs uses. We are on Salesforce because we're a massive company with a lot of subscribers. But for like smaller companies, I think Klaviyo is really easy to work with. And then Attentive for SMS is my pick.
On that note, it comes down to like 3 different criteria that I think you should ask really out of the gate when you're exploring what vendor to work with. And I think this is applicable for all vendors. I think number 1 is performance. So start to ask questions around cookie dependency. Ask and have a really good handle on what performance can you expect, how performance is measured, and what will be the source of the overall performance. Are they pointing you to a proprietary reporting system that they have, or are they pointing to a Google Analytics? What kind of support is available afterwards? Salespeople are incredibly responsive. That's great. Support people, not always, right? And then that kind of goes to the contract is that, make sure that, you have SLAs or, certain criteria in place as it relates to performance and support so that if you're not getting what you were initially sold, then you have the ability to get out of that. And another question to ask, are they, willing to guarantee performance? Do they have skin in the game? Are you able to test or run a pilot period before entering into a 1 or 2 year agreement? I think there's been a lot of people that have been burned by, hey, you know what? The sales pitch sounded great, but it didn't exactly match up to what was sold. Just make sure that you have those kind of criteria in place. So it's performance, support, and contract and term. Really good questions to ask within the first 1 or 2 phone calls.
Anything to add, Brian?
I mean, nothing to add. I would say my choice is Klaviyo as well, Klaviyo. Just because to what both of them said, I mean, the support at Klaviyo is awesome. Good knowledge base if you're getting started. For me, it's about analytics. They have a great analytics tool, but they also have really good UI for flows. So it makes it really easy, especially for startups. I think a lot of startups will pick like MailChimp or Constant Contact or something just because it's easy. But I think you run into obstacles really quickly because you're missing some of those abilities to do more triggered capabilities and messages.
I just want to build on that for a second about Klaviyo. The ease of use is really fantastic. So I was not an email guy, and then the email guy quit on Tuesday. So on Wednesday, I had to take over email marketing for a list size of millions of people, and Klaviyo just made it really, really, really easy. So I recommend it highly. And it integrates really well with Shopify and other systems that personalization and flows are confusing, and they make it pretty straightforward. So okay, I have one more question on Campaign Sends, but before, go for it. Device fingerprinting.
Yes. Question was related to device fingerprinting and will that replace cookies? Yes, I believe to a large degree. I think that it will. Cookies, even first-party cookies, it has breakage, right, inherently, right? So for a cookie-reliant solution, in order for them to identify particular users, that user must be logged in or must have an active cookie session on the particular device in which they are browsing. Brought up an excellent point. If you're working with a vendor that does not have reliance on cookies, that's able to identify the particular device and then use that to track that back to an individual without cookies, we've seen firsthand how that's able to scale revenue and do that significantly.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a good question. The question is for a company like Crocs that has brick and mortar stores as well as an online presence, how do we kind of connect the data between the two, especially in terms of email connection? And that's something that we're like actively trying to solve now. As I said, we're on Salesforce, and Salesforce has they recently launched a CDP that is supposed to be the answer to that for us. So we're kind of just getting set up on it now. But that's definitely a challenge. I think that that a lot of larger companies with brick and mortar presence face.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I actually, forgive me, I should have brought this up at the outset. Brian is offering, I'm being serious, customers at the end, if you just leave your email address, he'll do an audit, essentially a raffle for somebody, for a small business. I should have said that at the outset, and having been on the other side of many of Brian's audits, that's a really generous offer because it's a lot of work. So leave your contact information up here, a card or something, for a chance for that. I do just want to go back to something that was said earlier. Brian, actually, you mentioned it about a campaign send and not just doing a batch and blast. And to me, if I'm putting my founder hat on for a second, it's like, holy cow, I'm working on so many things across so many different disciplines. And now you're telling me, that I can't send one email to everyone. Like, it's just a lot of work. So how do I balance the role of email when I've got 1,000 other things going on as a founder, and knowing that taking shortcuts, so to speak, that I didn't even know was a shortcut would be problematic? Can you just talk to me about prioritization for startup founders as it relates to email out the gate?
Whew. Wow. I think I don't want to scare somebody, to Craig's earlier point about me, suggesting you have to do all this different work. I think as a founder, again, if you're going to be creating an email campaign, there is a little bit of a commitment to do it. So you want to be consistent, especially with your subscribers. So first, kind of think about what can you commit to as a founder to continually send messages to your subscribers. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's every couple of weeks. And then really kind of think about brevity in your messages. I think a lot of founders think they've got to sell and push and add all this great things. The email itself has, like I said earlier, one purpose, and that's really to get the click. So include just enough information to kind of intrigue people, get people interested, and then click through to the website, where presumably you've done the work to kind of have that information on the website already expanded upon. So be short, be concise as much as possible, and then be consistent and do what you can do as a founder as you get started.
So we've got a little over 5 minutes left. I want to be sure to answer any final questions, so think through them. But we haven't touched on cart abandonment, and I know there weren't a lot of hand raises, but I think it's actually quite important, where customers will add a product to cart but not buy, and it's really low-hanging fruit. In a little bit, can you just talk about cart abandonment best practices?
Yeah, browsing cart abandonment historically has not been very sexy. And whenever I speak with brands about it and I ask them what percentage of your digital revenue is related to browsing cart, they don't know, because at the end of the day, it's typically about 1%. So it is also coincidentally the most personalized and highest converting messages that you could possibly send, because as long as you're able to identify the particular individual and you know what category or product they had an interest in, and you know that they're in their buying behavior, if you have the ability to scale that 5 to 10x, you're talking about, on a percentage basis, looking at, 5 to on up to about 15% of your revenue coming from these highly targeted, high converting, sends overall. So the challenge and the main reason why the percentage is so low is because of a number of vendors, including SMS companies, and there are very good ones out there. But when paired, an email service provider on its own that's cookie reliant will only be able to identify 5% of those browsing cart abandons, period. But when that ESP, like a great one, like a Klaviyo or a Marsis or Responses, et cetera, when that is paired up with a non-cookie reliant identification mechanism or vendor or company, the results get up to 5 to 10x. So it's low-hanging fruit. We talked about how 97% of people are not converting. you need to reach out to as many of those as possible and scale that, and it's extremely, extremely powerful. We're working with a number of brands to where just looking at browsing cart abandons, the overall percentage of revenue, again, it's as high as 15, sometimes 17%. Low-hanging fruit, it's right there. You just need to plug it in and kind of get away from that cookie dependency. And also, when the timing is right for that, also, does it make sense to do that as soon as you start a website and do that? No. Build your list, limit your testing, don't overthink it. But as you start to grow, that's something that you really need to take into consideration.
Anything to add? Content, offers, other things, or no? Okay. Any questions about anything we've discussed for the group? Yeah.
They do have their own one for sure. And Klaviyo is an excellent ESP. They do a great job delivering email. When paired with a non-cookie identification solution, you can kind of magnify that particular browsing cart abandon. But if you're just getting started, yeah, use Klaviyo and turn that on.
Any other questions before we close? Yeah.
So the question is, how do you work with retention teams to merge retention and digital marketing? And I guess my question to you is, what is the retention team at your company responsible for? Because in our company, the retention team is on the e-commerce team.
So our retention team is customer experience, partnerships, it's me. It's a lot of different things. So as we grow, I'm curious how, I like to have a hand in what the emails look like, but it also seems like as we grow, that might be a little bit more divided, if that makes sense. Sorry if I'm not doing a good job.
No, that's totally fine. I think it depends on the product or the company. I think kind of what I said at the beginning of email can be a victim of its own success. Like a lot of people want a hand in what's in the emails. And I think that is just always going to be a challenge, whether you're a small company or whether you're a large company. But I do think that whoever is in charge of email should be really in tune with what the customer is thinking. So if in your role in retention, working with customer experience, that feedback that you gather is absolutely vital to the email strategy. So I think you just need to establish a way to action that feedback.
So I get a little bit confused about how often I'm mailing somebody, and I use Klaviyo, however you say it, but I'm setting it up, and so I understand that you guys say it's very easy to use. It's a shit show on my end. It's no joke, right?
Don't beat around the bush.
I want to have an anxiety attack every time I open it, right? So I've got welcome sequences, I've got abandoned cart sequences, I've got my newsletter, I've got a freebies section, resources, etc. And so I oftentimes throttle back because I feel like I'm over emailing people, and I feel like I'm missing out. But I'm also personally, because I'm not the email marketing person. Yeah, I'm not emailing nearly as much as I think I should be.
It's been a few years since I've worked with Klaviyo, but I believe it set a frequency cap in there. So you can set a cap of subscriber only receives one email per day, and I would definitely recommend doing that. That would probably solve some of your concerns. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's called, or there's another tool, Smart Send maybe in Klaviyo, where basically it toggles what priority a message gets. So if you're sending a broadcast and you're sending a cart abandonment, you could set certain messages with this Smart Send, I'm forgetting what the name is, and that will give certain priorities to one or the other. so that, in my mind, a triggered email like a cart abandonment is going to be a higher value than maybe a newsletter. I would give it that priority and like unmark the newsletter in that case. Does that make sense?
All right, so we are at time. Actually, it's cool to see a lot more questions. We can go over a couple minutes, and then also hopefully you guys will stick around a little bit longer. So why don't we do that? We'll have one more question, then closing. So go for it.
Our company's client list has several data points, one of which is a physical address. And we've used direct mail to contact them. So my question is about a platform that would have the SMS, the email, and the direct mail kind of fully integrated. Anything comes to mind?
So not to say it 1,000 times, but Klaviyo does have an integration with a platform that does direct mail. So depending on what platform you're on, I think they have a couple of integrations, but certainly you can set something up like that.
All right, so in closing, well, first of all, thank you guys for being here. It's late in the day, late in the week, and you guys were incredibly engaged. So I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave your name and email for a chance to win a free audit from In the Inbox. And then in closing, I guess, for the audience, if each of you had one thing about email that you wanted the group to take away, what would it be?
I would say don't ignore your post-purchase experience. I don't know about you guys, but every time I order something online, I open up that shipping confirmation probably 4 or 5 times just to like see when it's coming. And that's actually one of our highest sources of traffic from the email channel for Crocs personally. So really take a close look at what your transactional and what your post-purchase emails look like and figure out ways that you can find some of those cross-sell and upsell opportunities within those emails to an earlier question.
Yeah, there are a lot of headwinds that are going on right now, right? Media costs are going up, cookies are going away. There's a lot of headwinds. So invest in your owned channels, especially as you're starting out. Take a hard look at email. That'll be your most effective channel in a number of cases. And it's also a channel that you have a lot of control over. So whereas we head into Q4 here and all the Fortune 500 companies are blowing out their marketing budgets and media costs are going up, you'll have that list to be able to market to. So incorporate segmentation, incorporate personalization. They're very important. And as you grow, look for alternatives to first-party cookie tracking and start to take a look at other ways to be able to identify individuals and taking a look at devices that are not cookie reliant. And browsing cart abandons are sexy. Sexy is coming back.
I don't know how to follow that up. I would say my takeaway is engagement is key, right? We didn't really get a chance to talk about metrics or statistics, and I know that would be no better way to make you all fall asleep, but it really is one of the most important things about email is just making sure that you are keeping a pulse on how your campaigns are doing and using that data to improve. There's a ton of information that you can collect with every send, and the more that you can kind of look into it, dig into it, and apply it, the better your program's going to be in the long run.
Can you spend another 30 seconds talking about those metrics? Seriously, just high level, go. Open rate, click-through rate, purchases.
Good job. Come talk to me if you want to talk about metrics. I'll be in the corner.
Thank you guys very much.